you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today is an update for the Off Balance Templar, the Magicka Templar build for Summerset. Now this is built around survivability, sustain, damage, and of course buffing the group. This is also built for single target and AoE damage alike. This is very, very strong indeed, and it did get a buff in Summerset because now staves count as 2 pieces, meaning we can utilize a full monster set and 2 5-piece bonuses as well. Now I'm going to go first of all into the stats so we can see where we are. Bonus first of all from the potion. We're sitting on 42.9k Magicka. This does actually go to 43k if you have all the right traits, which I do not. We have 909 Magicka recovery. We have 2.6k spell damage, almost 2.7, which goes higher with our weapon glyph. We have just short of 54% critical chance, which we actually get just over 54 if we have the correct traits. I'm missing a couple of divines. And we also have our spell resistance at 14k and our physical at 9.6. We're using 64 points into max Magicka, and we are a stage 4 vampire using the Thief from Understone and max health, max magic food. Now take into account, of course, we've got 17.5k max health. If you use different food, that's going to dip, especially if you're using recovery stuff. So it's very, very nice indeed. Now, I'm going to go over the skills first of all in detail, so if you are not familiar with these will make a lot more sense to you, but I would not advise skipping this part. If you do, you're going to miss out on tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff, and of course you won't fully understand the build and how it's supposed to work. Now, first of all is Shock Clench. This is in the Destruction Staff skill line. This is the third ability you unlock. It's called Destructive Clench until you put a Lightning Staff on. Then it's called Shock Clench. You morph it to this one specifically. It will hit the target with a direct damage attack first of all, which actually splash damages and hit nearby targets, and then it will apply a damage over time effect, as you can see. Really, really nice indeed. Now, that actually has a chance to apply Concussion. Because it is lightning, lightning has a status effect bonus if you're lucky, which applies concussion to the target, meaning that you get minor vulnerability on the target and everyone hitting it will have 8% increased damage. Any shock damage can do that. Because this is a damage over time, every tick of it can then possibly apply it. It's very, very nice to have on the bar indeed. Beast Trap, or Rearming Trap, we morph it to specifically. This is in the Fighters Guild skill line. This is the last ability you unlock. You need about level 8, I think, in Fighters Guild, so make sure you kill plenty of Daedra and skeletons and all that kind of stuff. So, and undead, so you actually get this unlocked. And once you do, morph it to Rearming Trap. Now, this doesn't pin bosses to the ground, but it does immobilize other targets. Put it down like this, and then it'll pop. And it'll give me 6 seconds worth of damage on the target, ignore that fire, and also will give me 6 seconds worth of minor force, increasing my crit damage by 10%. Now, after it's finished, it will reapply itself, so watch, here's the pop, there's the initial one. Now when that disappears, which it will now, it'll rearm and pop again. So it's on for another 6 seconds. You can see the time is still running. So you get 12 seconds worth of minor force. Now it's very important to the Templar because, of course, we want that 10% increase to crit damage because we have extra damage in our passives. You do want to crit on a Templar. Radiant Glory. Now this is in the Dawn's Wrath abilities. This is the last ability you unlock. It takes forever, so make sure you put a couple of these on your bar while leveling up. This is morphed to Radiant Glory on purpose. I can hear people screaming, but Oppression does more damage. Yes, it does if you have a lot of Magicka in your bar. The more Magicka you have left in your bar, so if you're nearly empty, it's useless, the more damage you will do. But because this is an execute, 9 times out of 10 you don't have much Magicka left anyway. So you're not always getting that full bonus. This, however, instead of doing the additional damage for having more Magicka left over, which means you weren't doing the rotations properly in the first place, this actually heals you for each tick of damage that it does, but for 20% of the damage done. Now, the lower the target's health, the more effective this is, so don't use this unless the target's quite low. If it's a boss, I'd normally use this around 30% inside your rotations, keep your dots up. If it's not a boss, then it's trash maybe around 40%, but 50% is too high. Make sure it's low health before you start utilizing this. It's expensive, but of course its bonuses to low health. Now, while it's low, I'll show you what it looks like. Jesus Beam, there you go. You see why it's called a Jesus Beam. Now, the lower the health, obviously the stronger it is, and the more damage you do, the bigger the heal you receive. So this is a very, very strong execute to use at the last phase of the boss's life, if you like, when execute is really, really stressful and loads of extra damage is coming in, but you heal for the privilege of using it. Very, very strong indeed. Next ability, of course, is Puncture and Sweeps in our Adric Spear skill line. This is the first ability we unlock. You get it very, very early. Morph it to this one specifically, so it's the Magicka version of it. Stamina one's going to be no good to you. Now, this does a lot of damage to a single target in front of you, but also the enemies that are in front of you as well, excluding the first one, will also take damage. But the one at the front will take the most damage. Every time you hit anything, you will heal for 40% of the damage done, whether it be the low damage or the high. It doesn't matter. And it looks like this. Stabby, stabby, stabby. Every stab will heal you. And each enemy caught inside of that will also take damage and heal you. But like I said, the front one takes the most damage. Now, in a light, this is in the Mage's Guild skill line. This is very, very simple. You put it on your bar for the increased max Magicka. This is a level 2 Mage's Guild you unlock this. It gives you 5% increase to your max magic, and it gives you a 10% crit bonus. I know it says 2191 and it's stats and it's confusing, but that's 10%. 10% critical chance in the form of Major Prophecy, which is a buff type. Mage's Guild ability again, Ice Comet. We use this as an oh shit button. We use it if the target is very, very low health and we don't have enough ultimate to fire our back one. Apart from that, we never fire this. Although it can do a lot of damage on the initial hit, 9 times out of 10 it doesn't actually crit and you waste your ultimate. I use the back ulti instead, unless it's almost dead. However, this requires Mage's Guild 10. So if you don't have it yet, you can put anything else on the front bar if you want. Now, Harness Magicka is in the Light Armor skill line, if I can find it. Where's it gone? Light Armor skill line, this is annulment initially, but you morph it into Harness Magicka. This is your shield. Put this on, and you coat your health with that purple overlay there. You will take about 14k damage in the shield before it hits your health. It doesn't have any resistances, so it's a flat 14.3k, I believe, but it will save you. Also, if it doesn't disappear and you actually take magic damage, projectile-wise, you can actually gain 1.4k Magicka per hit for 3 hits as long as the shield lasts. So you actually have a bit of sustain there as well. It's really, really handy. Blockade of Storms. This is in the Destruction Staff skill line. This is actually Elemental Blockade, morphed from Wall of Elements. Second ability you unlock. It's very early on in the game, and depending on what staff you're using, depends on what damage it does. This specifically is called Blockade of Storms because you're using a lightning staff, and any enemy concussed will go off balance for 5 seconds. Now, bosses generally have a 15-second cooldown, and you can have a 5-second uptime. So every 20 seconds, you can have 25% of the time the target can be off balance. And this build is aimed at pushing as much of that as possible. So with all the lightning damage that we are doing, we have a high chance to concuss the enemy. This guarantees off balance if they are concussed, and this works alongside other people as well. So if you're using this alongside perhaps the Easy Sork, which is on my channel, for example, you are going to get off balance as long as the target is not on cooldown. It's going to happen. Let's see if we can concuss it. And we'll go off balance. Boom, there you go. You see that blue symbol there? One with a, looks like the stars are flying around somebody's head. That is off balance. Now, if you look at the target again, you can see the guy standing in there looking really heroic. That is the cooldown to off balance. So, very simple. You need to make sure that is down all the time. Any enemies caught inside that will take shock damage every second for 8 seconds. You must keep this wall down. If this isn't down, stop doing your damage and put it down. Vampire's Bane. This is in the Dawn's Wrath abilities. It's the first one you unlock. This is a single target damage over time ability, like this, in the form of a fireball, and for 11 seconds that does damage. It's very, very strong indeed, and you want to make sure you keep that in your rotation at all times. You start off with the original version of it called Sunfire, but this particular morph is called Vampire's Bane. Very, very strong indeed. It does give you a crit bonus, which is Major Prophecy, but we already have that on, so that part of the skill is irrelevant. Also, next is Inner Light. Again, just like on the front bar, we double bar it to make sure we get 5% increased max Magicka on both bars. Blazing Spear, this is essential, not just for you, but for your group as well. It's an 8-second damage over time on the ground, just like Wall of Elements is, except this does magic damage every second, and people can pick this up. Your friends or your allies can synergize this and gain almost 4k magic or stamina back, whichever one of the two resources is highest for them. This is very, very strong indeed. You throw it down, and it does damage over time. An initial hit, and then damage every second for 8 seconds. Keep this down, and Wall of Elements down, at all times. Really, really important. And of course, to make sure you utilize your concussion properly, not only do you keep those two down, but you keep your destructive clench up as well, all the time. Very important. Now your ultimate on the back bar is Thunderous Rage. This is in a Destruction Staff skill line. This is at level 50 you unlock this, and this is what we use over Ice Comet at all times. Because it's lightning, it's actually called Thunderous Rage instead of Elemental Rage. But what this does is all enemies caught inside of this will take damage once a second for 7 seconds. However, because it's shock damage, we gain a further 2 seconds because we're using a lightning staff. So this actually lasts 9 seconds. The damage looks like it's quite low there in comparison to Ice Comet, but it is not, because that's every second, not just the initial hit. Ice Comet actually fires off a nasty initial hit, which can go quite high in Trials if you're buffed up to hell, and of course it does damage over time while on the ground. But this does a wider range of AoE, and it can concuss the enemy, which means your Wall of Elements can then knock them off balance as well as do an extra damage. It's very, very strong indeed. As long as I've got enough ulti, I can show you what it looks like. There you go. That there is absolutely mental. Now it goes much, much higher, of course, while you got buffs running and all that good stuff, but it's really, really nice. It just went off balance by itself. It concussed itself and went off balance while Wall of Elements was running. There you go. Really, really nice. Now, passives, important stuff. Very, very important indeed. Increases your critical damage done by 10%. This here, the Beast Trap, will increase our crit damage by 10% with Minor Force. This passive here also increases our damage by 10% if we crit. Really, really handy stuff. Increase the amount of damage you can block with melee attacks. If you get hit with heavy attacks or something like that from a boss and you're blocking at the time, you take less damage. This is very, very important. You deal damage once every half a second, with 25% chance to do so. Physical or magic, depending on which one's higher. Obviously ours is magic. For using a Adric Spear ability, for doing damage with it. So, this here can proc that extra damage. This here can also, once every half a second, proc that extra damage. You can see there it's doing 3 hits there instead of 2. They do 2, then 3 again. And again. And again, you can see that they... Now, if you stack them up, they can both fire. Not at the same time, but one can fire in one half a second and the other can fire in the next half a second. So as long as you keep this spear ability up and this spear ability up, that passive free damage can happen a hell of a lot. It's really, really handy. Now, this will increase your weapon damage by 6%, which is irrelevant, but it does increase your spell resistance, so we're a bit tankier, so you do want to get that. Dawn's Wrath is very, very important. Increases the duration of those abilities of that particular skill line, so this is obviously longer, and of course Vampire's Bane is obviously longer. Also, if you use one of those abilities once every 6 seconds, you will gain Ultimate. So for using a Jesus Beam or Radiant Glory, and for using Vampire's Bane, once every 6 seconds, either one of the two will give you Ultimate back. Also, for doing exactly the same as that, you will give you and 5 other members Minor Sorcery, increasing their spell damage by 5%, yourself included. Of course, as well, this reduces your Magicka, Stamina, and Ultimate costs, so everything we use is cheaper. We're using a lot of class abilities. Class abilities across the board, across all classes, are actually quite expensive. Most setups out there spam loads of weapon abilities. We are actually using a lot of class abilities, and we want to make sure the cost is reduced. Restore and Light, this is not hugely essential because we're not really using any of the abilities, but the one you do want to get above all is this. This will increase the speed of your resurrecting. So if you pick somebody up, you do it 20% faster. You give them back 100% more health than anybody else would if they res them. And of course, you have a chance of filling a soul gem, not just using one. This is really, really good. You res really fast. You need to pick people up quick. Destruction Staff. Of course, these are very, very important. Get every single one of these, but important stuff. Shock Staff. This here, if you heavy attack with a lightning staff, you will do splash damage to the enemies nearby, up to 136% of the damage already done. Really, really nasty. This here, any destruction staff abilities, including your clench, your wall of elements, your light, and your heavy attacks, and your destro staff ultimate, will actually go through 10% of the enemy's resistances, flat out. Increase the chance of burning, concussion, and chilled status effects, meaning that the concussion that we're trying to apply has 100% more chance to fire. So that's more off balance as well if you can utilize that. This, of course, is very important. Lightning staves increase your damage done with area of effect abilities. Splash damage from these that hit targets nearby is AoE. The splash initially from this is AoE. The damage here is AoE. So is this, and so is this. And so is the destruction staff ultimate. Everything we're doing pretty much, apart from one dot and a beast trap, is area of effect damage. Really, really handy stuff indeed. Make sure you get these passives as soon as possible. And of course, if you kill something with a destro staff, whether it be an ability or a light or heavy, you will get 3.6k back. Magicka, that is. If you heavy attack something, you get magic back instantly anyway. If a target is off balance, you get double resources back. If you kill them with a heavy attack, you're getting that 3.6k as well. That is where it comes into tactical play. A boss, obviously, you'll want to execute it with a Jesus Beam and a rotation, but if it's trash, you might want to finish it with a heavy. We don't need resto stuff. I'm not using that. We are using 5 pieces of light armor. That's very important, by the way. This magic shield requires you to have 5 pieces of light armor equipped and able to use it. So make sure you do. We're using 5 light, so we get bonus to recovery for each piece worn. We get a bonus to reduction to cost for each piece worn. We get a spell resistance for each piece worn. And of course, for 5 pieces, we have an increased critical chance damage. We also have an increased critical chance of 10%. And we also have a bonus to penetration, meaning we go through 4884 resists of the target, as well as a 10% for the Destro staff. Really, really important. Now, we don't need this one. I've got it anyway for other builds, but we don't need this. We do need this because it reduces the stamina cost of our abilities. We are using a stamina ability. We're using Beast Trap. We want to reduce it. And you also want this to reduce the cost of dodge roll. This one here is not important. It's for PvP or for hiding and sneaking and stealing stuff. So get Athletics and Windwalker and you're good to go. Heavy, get these ones. And that's it. You don't have to have them all if you don't want to, but I would highly recommend this one first of all. Juggernaut will give you 2% increased max health because we are using 1 piece of heavy armor. Each piece improves that bonus. We also get return for resources for being hit. It's not massive, but it does count. And we get a small bonus to resistance. Really, really nice. Now, we are a vampire, of course. We get an increase of 10% max recovery for Magicka and stamina. Really, really handy. As passive, get it. Also, we have a reduction to damage when our health is low. If we are under 50% health, the lower we go, the more damage we can take because the incoming damage gets reduced by 33% or up to 33%. So you can go quite low and still be fairly safe. I know people are scared of fire, but just don't stand in the fire. Most fire in the game will one-shot you whether you're a vampire or not. So if it's on the floor, like this, don't stand in it. If it's aimed at you in a straight line, like a wall of elements, for example, or a fireball across the floor, just move aside and then move back in again. If it's a fireball, block it or dodge roll it. If you're standing in it and you die, it's not because you're a vampire, it's because you bloody stood in it. It's very simple. Too many tears about that. Not enough understanding about mechanics. Now, Intimidating Presence you are going to need from the Fighters Guild skill line so you can reduce the cost of Beast Trap. You are going to want this to increase your ulti regen. And what this means is if you get the kill and blow for undead, Daedra or werewolf enemies, you will gain 9 ultimate per kill. Very, very important indeed, because you can spam your ulti more often. Mages Guild level 10, you are going to want for Ice Comet, but if you don't have Ice Comet, don't worry. But you will need to get this. This increases the maximum Magicka and recovery that you have based on the amount of abilities from the Mages Guild on your bar. Now this is a Mages Guild ability. It gives us 5% already. Now it gives us a further 2%. This is Mages Guild. This gives us an increased 2%. That's why the Ice Comet is on the bar. It's not there for the damage, it's there for the passive. If you can get Mages Guild 10, you're all good. Get all these passives as soon as you can because it increases the duration as well if you do use the abilities and all that good stuff. But above all, you want this one. Undaunted, this is essential. If you pick up a synergy, you get 4% of everything back. Any synergy you pick up, regardless of what bonus it gives you, and they are bonuses, this will give you resources back. So pick up as many synergies as you can bloody see. If it's a spear, it'll give you stuff back plus this. If it's a bone shield, it'll protect you and your group plus this. If it's a Nova, it will do damage plus give you this back. Pick them up. Stop leaving them on the floor for everybody else. They can be very, very beneficial, not just for you, but for the group as well. Press the synergies. Undaunted Metal, we're using 3 types of armor. We're using 1 heavy, 1 medium, and 5 light, which means our overall bonuses are increased by 2% per type. So we have a 6% bonus to health, magicka, and stamina. You may want Siege Shield and Purge for certain trials. Your raid leaders, I'm sure, will tell you about Sanctum Ophidia on hard mode, or any mode, in fact. This is not important for now, but make sure you can unlock them just in case you need them. High Elf, yes, of course, we're a High Elf. 9% increased max Magicka recovery, 10% increased maximum magic, and we get an extra bonus of 4% for Flame Frost and shock damage. So we are very good for damage and sustain. Alchemy, make sure you get this as soon as possible. Max this out, then dump all the points and just get medicinal use. There's a link in the description for an alchemy guide which will show you how to get there really, really quick and utilize this. But we're using potions that last 36 seconds. If you have this, your potions will last 47.6. Now, the potions we're using, I will show you. They're over here. In fact, I'll show you how to make it. I'll also show you how to make the poisons in a bit as well when we get to the gear. Where the hell's the alchemy table? I've got to remember this because sometimes I muddle up 2 different materials. I believe it's this, this, and this. So cornflower, lady smock, whoops, cornflower, lady smock, and bugloss, I think. No, it's not. It's water hyacinth. So there you go. We have the increased spell damage by 20%. We have the extra crit bonus. We get magic back, and we have major intellect as well. So use those. They're really, really handy. Now, you don't have to have max skill level, obviously. You can just dump it later. But if you want to keep it to make potions with, then of course you're more than welcome to. But you will see, like I said, the potions last 47.6 seconds instead of 36. Really, really nice indeed. Now, switch outs. If you are in a situation where you are having to interrupt quite a lot, you can switch to your back bar and replace your inner light with Crush and Shock just for long range interrupts. Or in fact, you can replace Destructive Clench with Crush and Shock. This does element damage, which I'll show you in fact. 3 different types at once. It's a single target hit. It's got massive range and it will interrupt the target. It will stop them casting. That is crucial for some dungeons and some trials as well. And if you don't utilize that at the right times, you are stuffed. But also, if you stun them, you'll knock them off balance as well. It's really, really handy. I think that's pretty much it for that. So we're going to go over the CPs. Nope, we'll go over the gear first. We're using 5-piece War Maiden, sharpened staff on the front, a lightning staff specifically, using a weapon and spell damage glyph, an increased glyph. Now, we're using 4 pieces. We're using 3 jewelry and 1 staff, because staves now count as 2 pieces. So although we're holding 4 bits, this counts as 5. This gives us spell crit, maximum damage, maximum spell damage, and of course it increases our spell damage towards our magic abilities by 400. That's very specific. It's not magic casted abilities, it's magic damage. This is lightning damage. This is magic damage. This ability here, read it in the description, magic damage. That is an element type. That's misunderstood by most. They usually think you just cast ability that costs magic. That's not true. It's an element type. So this does as well. Your puncturing sweeps, your spears do as well. Your main spammables and your main ground dot all use magic ability, magic damage. So it's really, really nice to utilize those spammables and those uptime dots just to make sure that they're pushed that little bit more. You can use other sets if you want, but this has actually been kind of top out as far as all the testing that I've done so far. Really, really nice. Now, of course, we are using a Maelstrom weapon on the back bar, which increases our light and heavy attack damage all the time, in fact, as long as the enemy is inside this wall of elements. Now I'm going to give you a quick example. Obviously I'm not using any buffs, but you can see this light attack here when the glyph fires, 5.7 tops. Now if we put this down, 8.1. You see the difference? 8.5 in fact. Massive. Now the same applies with Magicka. We need to put our food on. We didn't even have any food on. We'll start again. What is it? Crit, you bastard. 6.3. That's an off-balance one. That don't count. We'll worry about that later. 10.1. Massive. Big, big difference. That's without buffs and without even spell power increase. So the Maelstrom weapon is essential to the setup if you can get it. However, if you don't have it, you can use a crafted staff or you can use a War Maiden staff on the back as well. But make sure that it's lightning and it is charged, because that will increase our chance to apply concussion. As you saw then, the target went off balance really, really quickly without even trying. That is what that is for. It's really, really important to improve your concussion chance so that when you do put down your wall of elements, you can guarantee off balance when it happens. We are using poisons. This particular one is Nirnroot, Fleshfire Lava, and Nightshade, along with Alkahest, and this will give you 2 damage over time bonuses to poison, or damage to poison. It's really, really handy. There's lots of other poisons out there. It's up to you what you use, but I preference this one. We're using 2-piece Grofdar. This is 1 piece in infused. The headpiece needs to be in heavy or medium, and the shoulder needs to be in heavy or medium, but 1 of each, not both the same. This should be in divines, but it's not. Now, this will increase your max magic by 1k almost, just a bit over, and this will deal damage to enemies within 8 meters of you once a second for 5 seconds, and it's going to apply 5 seconds after that. It's got 10 seconds from the initial proc. Now, you've seen it already, but we'll get it to fire. He says. There you go, that is Grofdar. Anything caught inside that will take damage every second. Really, really nice. Very powerful as well. Now, the other set we're using, of course, is Overwhelming Surge. Now, this is max magic, spell damage, and when you activate a class ability, you have a 15% chance to activate this particular proc, which does damage once every second to the closest target within 12 meters. This is shock damage. This can apply concussion. This goes along with everything else that we're using and can further push that chance to get off balance more often. It's very, very strong, and it deals direct shock damage as well with 0 cooldown once it's run off. So it doesn't reapply itself while it's active, of course, but if you want to count it in that respect, it's got 6 seconds. 6 seconds from when it starts. So technically, if you are lucky, you can have this up 100% of the time because it can reapply once it's run out, almost instantly. Now what you need to do is use class abilities and it will fire. There you go, you can see the lightning. Zap, zap, zap. That's what it does. Now, most setups out there use a lot of weapon abilities. We are using weapon abilities, we're actually using 2, but our spammable is our class ability. And one of our main dots is our class ability, It's on again, it's fired all again. Jesus Beam is, this all class abilities. Any of those can activate it. It's very, very strong indeed. Now, again, to recap, infused on the large pieces, head, chest, and legs. I'm missing a couple pieces, by the way, so don't laugh at the traits. Divines on all the small, meaning feet, hands, belt, and shoulder. I'm missing three divines. Now, on the jewelry, you want spell damage on every single one of them, arcane on 2 of them, and bloodthirsty on the last one, on any of them. It doesn't matter if it's a ring or a necklace. This will increase all of your damage you do while the target is under 25% health by 10%. However, if you don't have access to this, you don't have Summerset, and you don't have access to this particular trait, don't worry, arcane is very, very close still. You will do just fine. You can go arcane in all 3. Entirely up to you. Now I'm going to go into the champion points, and then we'll get into the rotation and start making a bit more sense of this. Of course, these can be changed depending on the fight, but for me, I like this overall setup. 56 points into Ironclad, reducing the amount of damage we take from direct damage attacks. 64 into both of these, meaning that our flat poison, physical, and disease, or our frost, shock, and magicka and flame damage that we receive is reduced by 13%. As well as all this different type of damage, any of those, if they are damage over time, will be reduced further by this by 19%. 15 points into here to make sure that we get an increased healing received. Of course, that means any heals that we do, so our puncturing sweeps, our radiant glory, anything like that that heals us, this will increase it. And of course, heals that are given to us will be increased. But above all, for getting 10 points in this tree while resurrecting another player, and you will be resin people, you take less damage. 15% less damage. Remember, we're a Templar, we resurrect very, very fast. So while we're doing that, we are tanky. Really handy. 44 into Warlord so that we reduce the cost of break free if we get stunned. It's very important. We don't have a lot of stamina. We are going to want to reduce the cost. 75 points into Tenacity, meaning that the return from our heavy attacks is increased by 14%. And of course, we have an increased 14% flat recovery. Don't put any more points into these because you're going to need a whole 25 points in either one of them to push them a further 1%, which is useless because if you put both of these to 100, you've just used 50 points and we don't even have 44 points to reduce our cost here. Use them effectively. 1% in here and 1% in here on top of what it already is going to lose 17% reduction to cost here. Use your points wisely. 56 points into Tumbling. We are going to need to dodge roll occasionally. We do want to reduce the cost. Again, our stamina pool is very small. Utilize this as much as you can. 51 points into Elfborn. We get 10% in our passives for increased critical damage. We get 10% for Minor Force for increased critical damage. We get 19% here for increased critical damage. They do multiply a little differently than that, but they does give us a bonus no matter what. So we do get an increase there, and we want to make sure that our crit damage is high, especially since we benefit from that as a class. 75 points flat into Elemental Expert, giving us a bonus to Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage. We're not using any Frost, but we are using Flame, Shock, and Magic. So this will boost them really, really nicely. Again, 25 additional points will put this to 1% increase. We don't get anything for 14.7 or 14.81. We only get it for the actual number, not the decimal. So 14% here. 9 points into Spell Penetration. Now, of course, we do have a bonus in our Destro skill to give us 10% going through from Destro abilities, going through resistances. We also have a resist increase to penetration here, so we go through that much of the target's resistance. We also have 4884 in our light armor. We also have a sharpened weapon, so we go through resistances again. You'll get resist from taunts and buffs and debuffs and all that stuff in dungeons and trials as well. Now, will you go slightly over cap with this? Yes. If you want to go really, really close to the edge, you can just put 1 point in here if you want. However, that's for the main target. The main target never has 100% buffs and debuffs applied to it so that you never have a dip. You want to make sure that this is slightly over so that when those gaps do come in, you can cover it. Also, area of effect. We have a lot of area of effect damage. We want to make sure that our penetration is high enough to make sure those splash damage enemies are getting hit quite hard. They're not going to be debuffed as much as the major boss, so you want to make sure that you buff it up just a little bit to do that extra bit of damage in AoE situations. 11 points into Staff Expert, increasing our light and heavy attacks. We are going to utilize those a lot, especially in rotation, which you will see. And we are doing a bit of direct damage as well. Some of our abilities, although they're damage over time, do have direct damage initially on the initial hit, especially Vampire's Bane and stuff like that. Also, our Overwhelming is direct damage as well, so this is very, very nice to have. 81 points into Thaumaturge for 24% increase to damage over time. We are doing shit tons of damage over time. We want to boost it as much as possible, but above all, we want this Exploiter passive because we are utilizing as much off-balance damage as possible. You get 70% increase to heavy attacking an off-balance target. You also get double resources back for heavy attacking an off-balance target, and for having this bonus here all of your damage, including what I've just mentioned, will go up by 10% during that phase. 5 seconds of every 20 seconds is the uptime on Off Balance. So 25% of the time, you can actually have a 10% increase to your damage. It's very, very nice indeed. Now, the rotation, very, very simple. Of course, some situations, you're just going to go in and kill loads of trash. You're going to go dot, dot, stab the shit out of everything. That's absolutely fine. Or you're going to put a dot down and heavy attack everything, and splash damage is going to kill it all. But you're not always in that situation. If you're up against a boss, you want a clean, viable rotation that is sustainable. Not just spam, 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 and then heavy attack to get your stuff back. You want to make sure it's balanced. And this is exactly that type of rotation. So make sure you've got your potions all the time as well, because that is going to help. But you start off with a Beast Trap. When the Beast Trap is down, there's your crit bonus right away. Swap your bar to the back one. Spear first, Blazing Spear. Light attack, Vampire's Bane, which I'll show on the skeleton in a minute. Light attack again, Wall of Elements, and then swap bars. So your back bar is very, very simple. You have your Beast Trap down to start with. Spear, Light, Vampire's Bane, Light, Wall, swap. That's it. Now the front bar is very, very simple. The front bar is Light attack, Destructive Clench, then Light attack, Stabs, Light attack, Stabs, Light attack, Beast Trap, swap bar, and start again. So we'll do it quickly. We'll go with, you'll keep your potions up normally when this is running anyway, but I won't do that for this demonstration. Beast Trap, swap bars. Spear, Light Vampire, Light Wall, swap, Light Clench, Light Stabs, Light Stabs, Light Beast Trap, swap, Spear, Vampire, Light Wall, Light Swap, Light Clench, Light Stabs, Light Stabs, Beast Trap, swap. Now I think you get where I'm going with that one. Now there are some alterations. Of course you saw that going off balance quite a bit, just messing around there. When it's off balance, on your front bar, instead of 2 stabs, depending on when the off balance lands, you want to fire off a whole heavy attack and then stabs, or stabs followed by a whole heavy attack, depending on whether it's just no fired or not. If you're on the back bar, for example, and it goes off balance, you want to make sure that you heavy attack as soon as you get to the front bar, because you do more damage and you get more sustain back. If it's off balance, make sure you heavy. If it's not, the rest of the time you can pretty much spam your abilities in the right order and you should be fine. Now, of course, there is an execute rotation as well. Now, what you do is instead of applying 2 stabs, you apply 2 Jesus beams. So you'll have your dots down and you'll do some of this. And that will kill it. But, key point, make sure that it's always 2, then you switch back to your other bar, put your dots down, and then carry on. You must have your dots down while you're executing, and you must sometimes heavy attack during that rotation, no matter how fast you think you're going to kill it. If you run out of juice, you're not killing anything. Make sure you utilize those off-balance moments and get your sustain back. And if it's not off-balance and you've been spamming for too long and there's nothing you can do about it, sometimes you want to weave in a heavy. Now, I'm going to show you a quick example on the PvP. No, Hulk, I'm not going PvP. Now, I'm going to show you a quick example of the rotation on a target skeleton, just to show you what you should kind of be aiming for, what to expect. It can go a little higher depending on the situation. The skeleton's a little bit stubborn to off balance. It's also a bit stubborn as far as some status effects are concerned. You may or may not get crits and all that good stuff. It's hit and miss sometimes. But I'm going to show you a good example nonetheless. Here we go. So hopefully that helped, hopefully that wasn't too boring, hopefully you now have a better understanding of how to use this particular build, what it does, why it's made the way it is, and why the sets and all the rest of it. There are countless weeks and hours and days of testing before I even get to this stage, so everything has been thought about, and hopefully that is now kind of come across in the video. So first of all, thank you all very, very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support, and if you are not subscribing already, please do hit that button. It is free. Furthermore, if you'd like to support the channel outside of YouTube, there are some links in the description for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, I now stream on as well, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com, where all the guides are. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching. I fully appreciate the support, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.